Okay, let's get started. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the public workshop on the Department of Toxic Substances Control, or DTSC's workshop on nail products. My name is Chin Xiao, and I'm a public participation specialist with DTSC, and will be facilitating this workshop. On behalf of DTSC, we're glad you are all participating today. Our distinguished panel members for today's workshop include Dr. Meredith Williams, DTSC Director, Ann Cooper-Daugherty. She leads the Safer Consumer Products, or SCP's, Chemical and Product Evaluation Team. Carl Palmer, SCP Deputy Director. Andre Algazi, SCP Branch Manager. Alicia Taylor, Staff Toxicologist and Presenter. Dtsc Yardimchi, Senior Hazardous Substances Engineer and Presenter. And lastly, we have Ephraim Newworth, Staff Toxicologist and Presenter. Please join me now to welcome Dr. Meredith Williams, DTSC Director, to give the opening remarks. Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Chin, and welcome to all of you to this workshop today. It will be a very information-full day. We thank you for joining us and making time for this discussion. This is an issue that DTSC has been working on since about 2011, when the initial sampling report was performed. That was really one of the impetuses for a focus on 3-free nail products. And many of you in the audience were very actively a part of that work and have continued to work towards safer nail products. Since that time, there have been continued efforts to protect consumers, vulnerable nail salon workers, many of whom are of childbearing age, and even their children, who sometimes they take to work and get exposed to the chemicals that are in those products. Today, DTSC staff will present preliminary results from the nail products information call-in of industry data. Also results from the sampling and analysis of nail products. Quite a large number of products were sampled for their chemical content, as well as results of DTSC's assessment of numerous chemicals and nail products that have been evaluated for further consideration as potential priority products, or perhaps eliminated from consideration based on the findings. These efforts, along with our work to develop best practices and criteria for healthy nail salon recognition programs around the state, that's a result of 2016's AB 2125, show our commitment to helping make nail products safer, and in particular, nail salon workers safer. Findings and level of effort demonstrate the complexities of formulated products and the challenges in assessing their risks and making safer, sustainable products. We really, truly thank you for your engagement and for being responsive to our questions. We need the input. We appreciate the response to the data calling. Thank you to SCP staff who have dug deeply into the issues and worked to support development of good information for our use in our decision-making process for the Safer Consumer Products Program. But we want to thank we also intend that information to be used by manufacturers, by consumers, and by nail salon workers. In a way, this is a culmination of the work that was started by 2011, but it's not really, because it's not the end. Our goal is to identify those places where SCP can make a meaningful difference in developing safer products and protecting the public against some of the potential hazards from those products. So I invite you to dig in today to participate. This is a program that's very committed to meaningful exchange, to providing information, and very open to receiving information to inform the decisions. So I hope you'll take advantage of that and share your experiences and your knowledge so that we can make good decisions about how to move forward. Thank you. And with that, Chin, you told me it's not Alicia, so I'm not sure who I'm handing it off to.
That would be me. Thank you,
Okay.
Dr. Williams. Today's agenda includes Part 1, Screening Research on Nail Products, Part 2, Information Call-in Request, and Part 3, Nail Products Laboratory Research Study. Each presentation will adjourn when there are no additional questions or at 5 minutes to the hour, whichever comes first. The workshop presentation slides will be available in the SCP Workshops and Events webpage after today's workshop. The recording of today's workshop will be posted to the SCP website. Let's begin the first presentation. I would like to introduce Alicia Taylor, staff toxicologist, to present nail products screening research. Please join me in welcoming Alicia. Alicia?
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for attending our public workshop, and thank you, Chin, for the introduction. Today, I will be summarizing the screening research on nail products. Next slide, please. I'd like to briefly describe the four-step process for the Safer Consumer Products Regulatory Framework, which has the ultimate goal of reducing exposure to harmful chemicals that are found in consumer products. For SCP to move forward in regulating a chemical in a product, first, the chemical needs to be on Dtsc's candidate chemical list. That's listed as step 1 on the slide. The CC list is a list of chemicals that has been designated by authoritative bodies based on their hazard traits or exposure potential. For chemicals not on the candidate chemical list, Dtsc can add the chemical to the CC list through rulemaking. Step 2 is a process in which we evaluate chemicals in the context of consumer products and then prioritize candidate chemicals based on their potential for exposure and adverse impacts. A product containing one or more of these candidate chemicals is then selected as a product chemical combination, and further research is then conducted. And then based on the findings, Dtsc may propose this product chemical combination as a priority product. Thereafter, rulemaking process may be initiated. The blue arrow on the slide indicates where we are in this four-step process for the 6 chemicals that will be discussed in this presentation. After listing the priority product through regulation, then we move on to step 3. During step 3, one of the most likely means of compliance with the regulation is for manufacturers that make or sell priority products in California to perform an alternatives analysis. An alternatives analysis is used to identify safer alternatives. So after conducting and submitting the alternatives analysis, then in step 4, Dtsc may determine whether manufacturers need to take any additional actions to protect human and environmental health. I'm not going to go into more detail for each step, with the exception of step 2, which I'll discuss in more detail on the next slide. More information can be found on our website on this 4-step process. Next slide, please. So here you can see step 2 broken down into its 6 individual components. What I want to focus on in this slide is where we are in the process for each of the 6 chemicals that will be discussed today. For the first box, screening and public engagement, today's workshop is considered an important component of this public engagement step. 3 of the chemicals, N-methyl-2-pyrrolidone or NMP, acrylic acid, and N,N-dimethylp-toluidine or DMPT, are also listed in this step. Triphenylphosphate includes a draft document for nail products containing triphenylphosphate, and it is currently being researched and written. Nail products containing triphenylphosphate will be proposed as a priority product. More information on this timeline will be shared later in the workshop. The pre-rulemaking workshop step, this step involves an opportunity for stakeholders to provide input on Dtsc's priority product proposal. The external scientific peer review step, or ESPER, is where we refine the profile based on public comment periods after pre-rulemaking workshop, and then again after ESPER. MMA, or a methyl methacrylate, is currently at this step. And toluene is currently in the rulemaking step. So as you can see, each of the chemicals are at different steps in this process. Next slide, please. Now I'd like to highlight the 3 projects that will be discussed today in each of the presentations. This presentation will focus on the screening research. However, findings from each of these projects informed the ongoing work in the other projects. Next slide, please. The goals of today's workshop include sharing overall findings on our research, announcing 6 prioritized chemicals. These 6 chemicals are broken up into 2 groups. 3 chemicals are being proposed as a nail product chemical combination priority product, and 3 chemicals in nail products have been proposed for additional research. Finally, this is an opportunity to gather more information and engage with the public. Next slide, please. For the purposes of today's workshop, Dtsc has defined nail products as products that are marketed or sold for application to fingernails or toenails, to color or remove color from the nails, to change the length or appearance of the nails, and to protect nails against damage. This definition can be found in our publicly available documents on nail products on our website. I'd also like to point out that there are many types of nail products that fall under this definition. Nail products sales annually exceed $1 billion here in the US, and nail salon workers frequently have exposure to potentially harmful chemicals. Salon workers often work more than 8 hours a day and more than 40 hours a week, and there can be poor ventilation in salons. The demographics of nail salon workers are predominantly women of childbearing age and non-white. As such, this sensitive subpopulation experiences environmental inequity from occupational exposures within salons, and this represents an overburdened community. This community experiences multiple factors, including both environmental and socioeconomic stressors that act cumulatively to affect health and contribute to persistent environmental health disparities. Please note that other minorities are not deliberately excluded, and they may also be salon workers. Rather, our intent today is to highlight a population that is found to be the majority of nail salon workers. Next slide, please. Here is a summary of Dtsc's major milestones on nail products since 2012. Dtsc has been concerned with the exposure to nail products for the past 10 years, when the first limited study was conducted in 2012. This was actually prior to the creation of the Safer Consumer Products Program. To date, considerable work has been accomplished on reviewing and promoting the safety of nail products. I'd like to point out that there are links embedded in these slides today. The slides will be shared on our website soon, and these links will be available at that time. I'd like to point out a few items on this list that are relevant to today's workshop. For example, in 2016, Dtsc began conducting screening research on chemicals in nail products, and this was with the help of stakeholder input. And then Dtsc held its first workshop on nail products in March 2017. In March 2019, Dtsc held the Toluene workshop, which was the first priority product proposed from these research efforts. February 2020 was the MMA workshop, which is the second proposed priority product from this work. To date, Dtsc has screened 38 chemicals found in nail products, and most recently, the information call-in has solicited information from stakeholders on ingredients in nail products. The laboratory study has analyzed nail products for chemical concentrations. These two studies, the call-in and the lab study, will be discussed in more detail in the other two presentations in today's workshop. The focus of this particular workshop presentation is to discuss the screening research conducted for chemicals in nail products. And again, the next two presentations, the goal will be to share preliminary data from the information call-in and the lab study. Next slide, please. Before we discuss the chemicals selected during the screening research, I'd like to briefly touch on some of the other chemicals that are not being further prioritized. Dtsc is concerned about other chemicals, for example, formaldehyde. However, a new law called the Toxic Free Cosmetic Act will ban chemicals, including formaldehyde. Therefore, Dtsc does not plan to prioritize the 24 chemicals that will be prohibited under this law. The full list of prohibited chemicals can be found using the link on the slide. Dtsc will be releasing a decision document on formaldehyde and hair straighteners at a later date. Next slide, please. This slide lists the 38 chemicals that were selected for screening research. The bolded chemicals are the 6 that will be discussed today. 32 of the chemicals were not selected for further research or prioritization. We recommend reviewing the background document that's been released on Dtsc's website for more information on all of these chemicals. The background document provides rationales for why 32 chemicals were not proposed as priority products and why they were not selected for additional research. The link to the background document will be shared in the chat. Although 32 chemicals are currently not prioritized, if more information is gathered, Dtsc may revisit these chemicals in the future to determine if further research is needed. The public is invited to provide comments on all chemicals, including the 6 that are prioritized and the 32 chemicals on this slide which are not prioritized. Later in the presentation, there will be more information on how to provide public comments. The remainder of this talk will focus on the 6 chemicals that are bolded. Let me be clear, these 6 chemicals are not formally prioritized at this time through our regulatory process. There are 3 chemicals that have been selected as proposed priority products, and as they move forward, more information will be communicated with the public. Next slide, please. Again, during the screening research, Dtsc reviewed 38 chemicals, and out of these, 3 chemicals, which includes toluene, methyl methacrylate, and triphenylphosphate, were selected for prioritization as proposed priority products. And 3, DMPT, acrylic acid, and NMP were selected for additional research. For the 3 proposed priority products, these have been previously, toluene and MMA have been previously announced. Dtsc intends to propose triphenylphosphate in nail products as a priority product. This has also been listed on SCP's timeline. There will be more information about triphenylphosphate toward the end of the workshop. For today's workshop, we're focusing again on these 6 chemicals. For all chemicals discussed today, the major exposure pathway of concern is inhalation. However, dermal and oral exposure routes are also possible, with incidental oral exposure occurring due to hand-to-mouth behavior, which is especially common in children, and this would also include accidental ingestion. Again, these 6 chemicals are not formally prioritized at this time through our regulatory process. As the 3 chemicals selected as proposed priority products move forward, more information will be communicated with the public. Next slide, please. The first chemical identified for prioritization is toluene. Nail products containing toluene have been proposed as a priority product in 2019. Toluene is a solvent in nail products, but has also been found as a contaminant. Hazard traits include nervous system toxicity, developmental toxicity, and respiratory toxicity. Toluene has been identified in nail products, for example, in the information column. It was found in 11 products as an ingredient and over 150 products as a residual or contaminant. In the lab study, it was detected in nearly 30 products. More information will be provided in the next presentations on specific types of nail products in which toluene is found. The current status includes toluene is currently undergoing the rulemaking process. Next slide, please. Safer consumer products regulations require Dtsc to set an alternatives analysis threshold, or AAT, for contaminants. Dtsc determines whether the AAT should be set at the practical quantitation limit or at a higher concentration. If a manufacturer produces a priority product with a chemical of concern at concentrations at or below the AAT, then they may request an exception from conducting an alternatives analysis. SCP has made a policy-based decision to set the AAT at 100 ppm based on 3 main reasons. 1, because of protection from intentionally added toluene in nail products. 2, due to other states' laws setting toluene threshold at 100 ppm. And during a 45-day regulatory public comment period, stakeholders indicated that if toluene is present as a contaminant in nail products, then the concentration is generally 100 ppm or lower. Dtsc has recently released additional information regarding this rationale and the requirements for the AAT for nail products containing toluene. More information can be found on the CalSafer website. There is currently a 30-day public comment period that is open on this AAT, and the comment period ends on August 8th. The link has been shared in the chat. Next slide, please. For each of the chemicals that I'll present today, the chemical summary slide, which you saw previously, will be followed by a list of questions. For all of the chemicals discussed in this presentation, again, the audience and stakeholders may visit CalSafer and submit responses to the questions that we're showing. We'd like to solicit the following information from the audience. How does toluene contamination occur in nail products? Is contamination a byproduct that occurs during manufacturing? Is toluene a contaminant from other ingredients added to these nail products? What is the difference between residual toluene versus toluene as a contaminant? Next slide, please. The second chemical identified for prioritization is methyl methacrylate, or MMA. Nail products containing MMA have been proposed as a priority product in 2020. MMA is also listed as a toxic air contaminant by the California Air Resources Board. It's used as a monomer when preparing artificial nails. Hazard traits include dermatotoxicity and respiratory toxicity. MMA is present in retail nail products. For example, in the information call-in, it was reported in 5 products, and in the lab study, it was detected in 38 products. MMA has been detected in indoor salon air. However, Dtsc is still seeking more information on the concentrations of MMA in nail products. MMA in nail products will be entering the rulemaking process soon. Next slide, please. Dtsc is still seeking information on nail products containing other types of methacrylates. Nail products with other methacrylates may also contain residual MMA or MMA as a contaminant. We'd like to solicit the following information. What are other methacrylates in nail products that contain MMA, either as a residual or as a contaminant? Up to what concentration is MMA considered a residual or a contaminant? Is there an effort to reduce MMA residuals or contamination in nail products? Again, the audience is encouraged to go to CalSafer and review this solicitation and provide input. Next slide, please. Our third chemical proposed for prioritization based on the screening research is triphenylphosphate. Other nail products containing triphenylphosphate are being proposed as a priority product. Triphenylphosphate is used as a plasticizer, and it provides strength and flexibility in nail products. Hazard traits include developmental toxicity and effects to the liver and thyroid. Triphenylphosphate has been identified in nail products. For example, in the information call-in, it was reported in over 1,100 products. In the lab study, it was found in 17 samples. As noted on Dtsc's website, the proposed draft triphenylphosphate profile has been announced, and there are plans to release to the public tentatively in early 2023. Again, stay tuned on our website for more announcements, and you can also check the SCP timeline. Next slide, please. We'd like to solicit the following information. Is triphenylphosphate used in nail lotions or oils? At what concentration is triphenylphosphate an intentional ingredient versus a contaminant? And finally, are there efforts to remove triphenylphosphate from nail products? Again, these questions can be found in the background document and on the solicitation listed on CalSafer. Next slide, please. The fourth chemical identified for prioritization is N,N-dimethyl P-toluidine, or DMPT. It's used as an accelerant for polymerization of liquid monomers when forming acrylic nails. Hazard traits include carcinogenicity and allergic contact dermatitis. DMPT has been identified in various nail products. For example, in the information column, it was reported in 39 products, and in the lab study, it was found in 7 products. In a database search, it was also identified in 8 out of 11 acrylic liquid nail products. At this time, nail products containing DMPT are proposed for further evaluation, which may include a proposed priority product at a future date. Next slide, please. Questions include, how widely is DMPT used? For example, in which nail products, for what functions, as an ingredient or as a contaminant, and finally, at what concentrations? Are there known safer alternatives to DMPT that are currently in use or are proposed? And what evidence indicates that these alternatives are safer? Are there any exposure studies that have detected DMPT in indoor salon air? Next slide, please. The fifth chemical identified for prioritization is acrylic acid. It's used to create longer lasting nail coatings, faster drying times, and for easier removal of nail products. Hazard traits include respiratory toxicity, dermatotoxicity, kidney toxicity, and nervous system toxicity. Acrylic acid has been found in nail products. For example, in the information column, it was reported in 72 UV gel nail products. However, in the lab study, the method selected for the analytical tools was not able to measure acrylic acid. In a database search from 2009 to 2019, approximately 450 nail products were introduced to the US market that contained acrylic acid. At this time, nail products containing acrylic acid are proposed for further evaluation, which may include a proposed priority product at a future date. Next slide, please. Stakeholder questions include, can acrylic acid form methacrylate? And is this reaction spontaneous? How frequently and at what concentrations is methacrylate found in nail products? Are there safer alternatives to acrylic acid that are currently used or proposed? Again, what evidence indicates that these alternatives are safer? And finally, are there exposure studies detecting acrylic acid in indoor salon air? Next slide, please. The sixth chemical for prioritization is N-methylpyrrolidone, or NMP. It's used as a solvent and surfactant in cosmetics. Hazard traits include reproductive toxicity and developmental toxicity. It has been detected in nail products. In the information column, it was not reported in any products. However, in the lab study, it was detected in 2 products. In a database search, it was found in 1 bonder and in 1 nail glue. During the lab study, NMP was detected in some nail polishes that are marketed specifically to children and pregnant women with non-toxic and safe claims. At this time, nail products containing NMP are proposed for further evaluation, which may include a proposed priority product at a future date. Next slide, please. We'd like to, first I'd like to note that there's limited information on NMP in nail products. So we'd like to solicit the following information from the audience. Is NMP present in other nail products? And at what frequency and concentration? How widely is NMP used in nail products and for what functions? And finally, are there efforts to remove NMP from nail products? And are there known safer alternatives to NMP that are either currently used or proposed? What evidence indicates that these alternatives are safer? Next slide, please. This concludes the overview of the 6 nail product chemicals. I'd like to redirect our audience back to our nails background document that is found on our website. Again, you can find the link in the chat. This document contains an extensive list of all of the questions that we would like answered. Again, while 32 chemicals are not currently prioritized, a number of them do have limited information or there are known data gaps. Therefore, DTSC is soliciting information from the audience on these specific non-prioritized chemicals as well. You can view information on all of the chemicals in the background document. And again, these slides will be shared on our website soon with the links available. And again, you can visit CalSafer and the link has been shared in the chat. Next slide, please. Thanks so much for your attention during this summary of the screening research. Again, please visit our website. You can find more information on these chemicals in the background document. This presentation will be available on the website soon. It'll include all of the links. The comment period for this work is open through August 16th. Again, you can access that directly by the link in the chat. We do look forward to hearing from you. In the following 2 presentations, more information will be shared on chemicals identified in nail products, specifically from the information call-in request and the laboratory study. Next slide, please. I'd like to acknowledge our team that did all of this screening research for chemicals in nail products. A big thanks to everyone for their really hard work. Next slide, please. Here's our contact information. Again, a version of this slide will be shared at the end of each presentation today. And this slide will also be available when the presentations are added to the website. At this time, I'll turn the presentation back to Chin to help facilitate questions from the audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. We will take this time for a Q&A session now. So it looks like we have a question in the Q&A section. Where can I find a list of all stakeholder question solicitation?
I can answer that. There has been a link shared in the chat. So the CalSafer link, there's a public comment period. I believe it's the last link that's just been shared. So you can access it there.
Thank you, Alicia. So we have our next question in the Q&A section. Lauren asks, hi there. are the levels of certain chemicals present in the nail products high enough to present a risk of human health effects for the endpoints of interest, reproductive toxicity, dermal, allergic reaction, etc.?
I'm going to defer to the staff who did specific research on the chemicals that were presented today to answer that question.
I guess I can provide some general answer to that. So our decisions are not risk-based analysis, but we go off of the current literature. So some of these chemicals, depending on the levels and the hazard traits that can cause human health hazard traits, such as for the toluene and methacrylate in the proposed priority product profiles, we cite the current literature that has actually shown human health hazard traits for these two chemicals, for instance. And yes, in general, to summarize, depending on the chemicals concentration, if say they cause respiratory toxicity, and if it is above certain limits, it can cause like adverse impacts via inhalation, for instance, for the toluene or MMA's case.
Thank you, Dtsc.
Thank you. So we have a question from Alexandra. Is Dtsc asking manufacturers if toluene contamination can be avoided? Some nail products appear to have no toluene. How can we find out what these companies are doing differently to avoid toluene contamination?
I'm going to defer that question to staff that have specifically worked on toluene.
Alicia, this is Christine Papagni. I'll go ahead and answer that question. We have reached out to at least some of the trade associations to learn more information about whether toluene can be completely eliminated from products, and we haven't received any answers yet, but we will continue to follow up with manufacturers individually to ask these questions.
And I think one thing to add on for information, Colin, we received from some of the stakeholders that reported toluene as a contaminant or a residual, but we haven't actually, that was the survey data, so we haven't tested those products. And if the manufacturers didn't report us toluene, if it was present as a contaminant or residual in their products, Dtsc does not have a way of knowing that. So depending on whether they reported or not, it may or may not be present in their products, so we don't really know.
Thank you, Dtsc and Christine. Our next question comes from Catherine. She writes, regarding 100 parts per million contaminant for toluene, is there anything in the proposed rule that requires manufacturers to show that they have been diligent in trying to reduce or eliminate contaminants before requesting exception? And her second part of the question is August 16th a hard deadline?
I'll answer part two. Our comment period does close on August 16th. I know in the past, sometimes comment periods are extended. At this time, I cannot speak to whether this comment period will be extended. So for now, please assume that it is a hard deadline. And for part one, for the toluene specific question, again, I'll defer to other staff to answer that.
Hi, this is Christine Papagni, and I'll answer the first question. Essentially, our rulemaking does not have any language that requires manufacturers to prove that they've been diligent in trying to reduce or eliminate contaminants before requesting an exemption. So if they can prove that toluene is in their product at less than 100 ppm, that is sufficient for them to request an exemption from the requirements of the rulemaking.
Hi, this is Carl. I want to just add in on the second part of the question too. As Alicia said, the August 16th deadline is for the background document. That's not a deadline that's related to a formal rulemaking. I want to highlight that the August 8th deadline for comment on the AAT proposed for toluene and nail products is a hard deadline because that's part of the rulemaking process. So if you want to chime in on that proposal, you need to get those comments in before the end of August 8th to be considered in the rulemaking. As far as the August 16th deadline, you know, the more information we get, the better decisions we'll make. So if you have something to let us know, great. If you can do it before then, great. If not, then, you know, we'll just have to take with what we've got to move forward. You can always give us comments and ask questions for non-regulatory timeframes, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. So right now, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in. Anybody want to raise their hand, or if you have called in, did you want to ask a question if you called in? Dial *9 to raise your hand if you called in. I'll give it a minute or two to see if there's any other questions coming in. I see Catherine, you've raised your hand. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up on my question asking about the proposed rule and whether there's anything in the proposed rule requiring manufacturers to affirmatively show before they request an exception, to affirmatively show that they've with due diligence have tried to eliminate or at least reduce contaminants. I do know that at least the state of Washington, which was referred to and used for support by Dtsc, by the Safer Consumer Products Program, as a basis for deciding on the 100 parts per million. The state of Washington requires manufacturers to show, I believe, from my reading of the law, before they can even be potentially eligible for the exception, they have to show that they have made attempts to eliminate or reduce a contaminant. So we will, of course, include that in our comments, but I think if the Safer Consumer Products Program is going to adopt this 100 parts per million, we can't, industry must do more than just throw their hands up in the air and say, we can't do any better. I don't believe that they can't do any better. And so I would encourage DTSC to rethink that. And if they stick with this 100 parts per million contaminant level, that they add more affirmative obligations on the part of manufacturers to get rid of those contaminants, or to research or investigate or try to find where they are and try to eliminate them. Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Catherine.
Can I just chime in for a second, Chin?
Of course.
Hi, Catherine. This is Andre Algazi, Branch Chief for Safer Consumer Products. What you're proposing, while I can definitely see some merit, it's the way the alternatives analysis threshold it works is spelled out in our framework regulations, which were adopted in 2013, and that's just the way it's set up. We can set a threshold, but there's not in the framework a provision for us to require that kind of diligence. So maybe your comment should just be about whether or not we should set the threshold at all or what it should be. Thanks.
Thank you, Andre. So I'm checking to see if there's any more questions coming in through the Q&A, or if anybody has their hand raised, and I don't see any at this moment. So if there are no questions for this portion of the presentation, let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break. So we'll reconvene back here at 10 o'clock. So take a 5-minute break, be back here at 10 o'clock. See you soon. Welcome back. Our next presenter will discuss DTSC's information call-in on nail products. Please join me in welcoming Dtsc Yordimchi, Senior Hazardous Substances Engineer, to give today's presentation. Dtsc?
Thank you for the introduction, Chin. Hello, everyone. Today, I will give you an overview of Dtsc's authority on conducting information call-ins, and also share with you the preliminary findings for the first information call-in request we conducted on nail products. Next slide, please. As Alicia mentioned in the first presentation, we used 3 different efforts to gather information regarding nail products. And the first Alicia's presentation focused on the screening research findings. And in this presentation, I will talk about information call-in. And next presentation, Ephraim will talk about analytical lab study conducted on various nail products. Next slide, please. California Code of Regulations gives us authority to request information from product or chemical manufacturers, importers, assemblers, or retailers via an information call-in. And as a result of this request, we can publish the responsible stakeholders on a list called Response Status List on our website. Next slide, please. And the response status list includes the company name and its response status. However, it does not include the information that's been submitted to us. And there are 3 possible response statuses for the list. The first one is response with information provided. This is when Dtsc receives the requested information from the stakeholder. The second case is response with information unavailable. This is when the stakeholder does not have and cannot create the requested information. And then the last case is no response. This is when the stakeholder, we don't hear back from the stakeholder, or they respond and say they don't feel comfortable sharing the requested information with Dtsc. Next slide, please. Before we conducted information call-in, because for the nail products, it was our first effort using this authority, there are several preparation steps Dtsc had to go through. The first thing we did is to add another section that, to our trade secret and confidential business information, also known as CBI, policy document that was specific to information call-in. It talked about how we are going to receive trade secrets and CBI type of data, where we're going to store it, and how we are going to work with this data while making it, we are keeping it safe and secure. After we did that, we also met with trade associations, and this is recommended for future call-ins as well. For the nail products call-in, we share our stakeholder list, questions, and also product definitions with the trade associations members to provide us feedback that we are asking, the product definitions are clear, and we are asking the right questions to receive the information we are looking for. And then the other thing we did is we added a new module called Information Call-in on our CalSafer website. This is where the stakeholders can go and submit to a call-in request electronically, including trade secret and CBI. And for the nails products call-in and for future call-ins, there are also other additional deliverables we had to put together. Next slide, please. First, we had to define the scope for a information call-in, and this could be as narrow as asking questions about a specific product chemical combination, or it could be a wider scope, such as for the nail products, we ask stakeholders, tell us what type of products you make or sell and what are the ingredients. And then the other piece is putting together a comprehensive stakeholder list For the nail products, we share our list with the trade associations to make sure all of their members are included in the list, and if they can think of other stakeholders that need to be included in this list. Other deliverable is the stakeholder questions. So for the nail products column, we also included the nail product definitions, and those shared with the members of the trade associations as well. Because as I mentioned, we wanted to make sure we are asking the right questions to receive the information we are looking for, and then the product definitions were clear to the nail product stakeholders. And for every information column, we will post those on our CalSafer site. For nail products column, because this was a first effort, we also put together a user guide for CalSafer that's also on our website that walks through the stakeholders how to submit to a column request step by step. And our official request goes out to the stakeholders via stakeholder notification letter. For nails column, we send out this letter via electronic mail and also to physical mail if we had their physical mailing addresses as well. Next slide, please. And with that, Dtsc conducted its first information column request on nail products on September of 2020. Initially, we provided a 90-day period. However, some of the stakeholders' contact information have changed. Therefore, they received late notifications, which resulted in late submittals. This request was actually closed on end of May of last year. And there are several goals we targeted with this column request, such as filling in the data gaps and reducing our staff's research time by contacting the industry experts. And also Dtsc may use this information to identify potential priority products and identify and analyze potential alternatives. The link included on this slide and also shared in the chat will take you to our CalSafer site that you can read in more detail about nail products information column request. This website also includes the stakeholder questions and nail product definitions as well. Next slide, please. And for the nail products column, Dtsc contacted over 250 nail product stakeholders, and majority of those stakeholders were manufacturers, about 200 of them. And for the response status list, we wanted to share the stakeholder questions and the product definitions with the members of the trade associations, but trade associations themselves are excluded from the response status list. And we also find out that 42 additional stakeholders need to be excluded from the response status list because they either went out of business or they own multiple brands, need to be merged as a single entity to be published on this list, or they no longer make or sell nail products in California. After we exclude those, that left us with over 180 stakeholders that are responsible to be published on this list. Next slide, please. And out of those 186, 153 stakeholders did not respond to our request. 33 stakeholders responded to Dtsc, which is about 17% response rate. And 31 of the responders provided us the requested information, and 2 of the stakeholders said they do not have and they cannot create the requested information. The link included on the slide here will take you to the response status list for nail products information column. This is also, you can also access this link with the previous link that's been shared on the chat as well. This list includes the name of the companies and their response status, keep in mind that it does not include the information they submitted to us. Next slide, please. In addition to the response status list, DTSC wanted to recognize those 31 stakeholders for collaborating with us. So when an entity voluntarily provides us information, DTSC recognizes them by publishing them on SCP Partner Recognition List, also known as PEARL for short. The first link will take you to the SCP PEARL that you can read in more detail. And the second link is the nail products information colon PEARL. This is where we listed those 31 stakeholders again to recognize them for collaborating with us. I would like to clarify, we are still evaluating the nail products colon data. Therefore, the stakeholders on this list, we don't know if their products are necessarily safer than others. We just wanted to recognize them for sharing the requested information with us. And with that, I will now share with you the preliminary findings from the colon data we received from these 31 stakeholders. Next slide, please. And before I do that, there are some definitions and caveats I would like to share with you. Next slide, please. So in the data set you will see today, I will talk about formulation numbers versus product numbers. Formulation contains common ingredients that are reported for a particular product type, such as nail polish. And product contains those common ingredients from a formulation for a given product type and additional ingredients, such as colorants, that make up the unique product. For instance, when a company submits a formulation for a nail polish and they say they make 20 different colors of that nail polish, the formulation number would be 1 and then product number would be 20 in that case. And for most of the product types, often the product numbers are higher than the formulation numbers. Next slide, please. There are some caveats I would like to mention to you before we look at the preliminary findings today. We received the data from these 31 companies. However, the data we received was not uniform across the board. And one of the things to consider, DTSC received partial product data, which means about half the companies provided us formulation and ingredient list, but they didn't provide us the product numbers. And the other half that provided us product numbers, DTSC accepted ballpark product numbers. Therefore, the product numbers are estimates in these results. They are not exact numbers. The other thing to consider, we had instances that some formulations reported ingredients as may contain, contaminant, residual, or impurity, and then we were provided with a product number. Those cases, DTSC doesn't know whether all of those products or only portion of those products contain these types of ingredients. Therefore, the product numbers are estimates for some of for the candidate chemicals that are reported in one of these categories. Another thing that I would like to mention, we had several instances for some formulations, the same chemical with the same function reported with multiple concentration ranges. For those chemicals, DTSC did a judgment call and we used the upper concentration range because we thought that could be the highest concentration range that chemical can be present for that reported formulation. And lastly, because we accepted data in different formats from these 31 companies, to be able to summarize the data and analyze it, we had to format it in a uniform way across the board. And we also had to do data cleaning because we had situations such as missing data. For instance, the chemical name was reported without the CAS number. We had to look those up from reliable databases to fill in those missing pieces. And we also had situations with duplicate entries, the same chemical, same function reported with the same concentration range. We had to clean those up across the database so that doesn't cause duplicates when we report estimate product numbers for those chemicals. And I would like to mention that this took several months of effort with multiple SCP staff working on it, doing the formatting and data cleaning. And after we took all these steps, we start evaluating the data, and today I will share with you the preliminary findings from this data set, but we are still evaluating this data set. Next slide, please. In the overall data set from these 31 companies and all the different nail products they make or sell, we had about 1,000 unique chemicals that's been reported to us. And for those, out of those chemicals, about 100 of them, which is approximately 10% of those chemicals, Dtsc identified them as candidate chemicals, also known as CCs. In this plot here, you see approximate numbers. The reason for that, we have two different cases when we identify these chemicals as candidate chemicals. The first case, we compare the CAS number to Dtsc's candidate chemical, also known as CC database. And I included a link on the slide here that you can look up the chemicals by keywords with the names or its CAS number. If it showed up on our database with its unique CAS number, then those are identified as candidate chemicals. The second case we ran into, some of these chemicals were reported as part of a chemical class. In our initial assessment, we also identified those if they showed up on our database under a chemical class as candidate chemicals. However, we need to further evaluate those chemicals that belong to a chemical class, because as we know that a chemical class contains more than one chemical, and depending on the chemical, the hazard traits could be different. Therefore, we wanted to evaluate those to see whether those chemicals have human health hazard traits and exposure potential to nail salon workers and consumers. And some of those chemicals may fall off our radar once we do complete our assessment for the chemical classes. And for the overall data set, about 45% of the companies reported at least one candidate chemical in all of their formulations and products. Next slide, please. Dtsc received over 1,300 formulations and over 13,000 products that's been reported to us as a result of this request. Notice the product numbers were much higher than the formulation numbers. This is going back to the definition of formulation versus product. Products contain the common ingredients from the formulations and additional ingredients. And often for most of the product types, the product numbers are higher than the reported formulation number. And on the slide here, the left-hand side, you see the number of formulations broken down by 4 main product categories. And the right-hand side, you see the number of products broken down by the same 4 main product categories. Each of these products are defined with their subproducts and their definitions are available on the link that's been shared earlier on our CalSafer site, if you would like to read the definitions. And going back to these plots, for the number of formulations, solvent-based nail coatings had the highest number of reported formulations. And for the number of products, UV gel nail products had the highest number of reported products. One thing I wanted to mention, not every company makes every single product and they make them with different product numbers. Therefore, some of these product numbers could be also higher because of different companies making different type of products. And both of these plots, you see orange bars versus blue bars. whenever a formulation or a product contains at least one candidate chemical, they are shown in orange bars. The orange bars also captures instances when a formulation and product contain more than one candidate chemical as well. And the blue bars represent whenever a formulation or a product does not contain any candidate chemical. As you can see, for all the product categories, they're dominated by orange bars, then blue bars, and for both formulations and products that's been reported. And the overall data set, over 95% of the total reported formulations and over 98% of the total reported products contained at least one candidate chemical. And now I will switch gears and talk about, give you some of the findings that the chemicals we summarize in our NAILS background document, and then the chemicals that we proposed as priority products in the past. Next slide, please. Toluene was the first proposed priority product that Dtsc proposed for nail products in 2019. And it was reported by 4 companies in over 180 products, with majority of those products being traditional nail polish. We zoomed in other product types in this plot because nail polish was reported in much higher numbers with 163 products. Toluene was mostly reported as a residual or contaminant that are shown in light and dark blue bars on the plot for various nail products with concentrations up to 0.1%. Toluene was also reported as a solvent in some top coats and thinners that are shown in the purple bars on the plot, with concentrations ranging 10 up to 25% for top coats and 5 up to 10% for thinners. Next slide, please. Methyl methacrylate, also known as MMA, was the second proposed priority product for nail products that Dtsc proposed in early 2020. MMA was reported by 4 companies in 5 products, and it was reported as a binder or adhesive in acrylic liquid monomers with concentrations above 75%. And it was reported as a residual in acrylic powders with concentrations up to 0.1%. MMA was also reported in one nail polish without any function information with concentrations up to 0.1%. Next slide, please. Triphenylphosphate, also known as TPHP. TPHP was reported by 10 companies in over 1,100 products. And majority of those products were nail polish. About more than 1,000 of those products were nail polish. And again, we zoomed in other product types for better visualization purposes because nail polish was TPHP was reported in much higher number of products for nail polish. TPHP was mostly reported as a plasticizer in various nail products, that's shown in the orange bars on the plot, with concentrations up to 10%. And it was also reported as a solvent in some nail polish and UV gel polish with concentrations up to 10%. TPHP was also reported as a contaminant in various nail product types that are shown in the blue bars on the plot. Next slide, please. Dimethyl p-toluidine, also known as DMPT, it was reported by 10 companies in 39 products, and 25 of those products were acrylic liquid monomers. And DMPT was mostly reported as a functional ingredient in various nail products. And one of the most prevalent functions, it was reported as a conditioning agent in acrylic liquid monomers and other nail products that are shown in the light blue bars on the plot, with concentrations ranging from 0.5% up to 1%. And the other prevalent function, it was reported as an artificial nail builder in monomers and other nail products that are shown in red bars on the plot, with concentrations ranging from 0.1% up to 5%. And other functions included film former, activator, binder, or adhesive. Next slide, please. Acrylic acid was reported by 5 companies in 72 UV gel products, and it was reported mostly as a conditioning agent for UV gel base coats, shown in blue bar, with concentrations 10 up to 25%. It was also reported as an artificial nail builder for UV gel base coats, that's shown in red on the plot, with concentrations ranging from 0.5 up to 5%. Acrylic acid was also reported in UV gel artificial nail and top coats without function information, and it was reported as a binder or adhesive in 1 UV gel polish as well. Next slide, please. As Alicia mentioned, California Toxic Free Cosmetics Act will ban intentionally added formaldehyde and personal care products in cosmetics, including nail products, on January 1st of 2025. But I wanted to share with you what's been reported to us regarding formaldehyde for the colon data. Formaldehyde was reported by 4 companies in over 200 products, and most of those products were nail polish with 163 products. We zoomed in other product types again on this plot because nail polish was reported in much higher numbers. Formaldehyde was mostly reported as a residual or contaminant that is shown in light and dark blue bars on the plot for various nail products with concentrations up to 0.1%. And formaldehyde was also reported as a hardener that's shown in green, or a cross-linker that's shown in gray for other nail products with concentrations ranging from 1% up to 5%. And with that, that concludes the preliminary findings that I will share with you today for the nails colon. And next slide, please. And next steps for the information column, we will continue our evaluation of the data set. We will also compare these findings with Dtsc's analytical lab study that we conducted on various nail products that Ephraim will talk about in the next presentation. Dtsc plans to publish these findings from the colon data set in a technical report, hopefully late this year or early next year. Next slide, please. I would like to thank my team members who helped with the preparation of the colon and also with the data cleaning and help make the summary tables and visuals you've seen in this presentation today. Next slide, please. And here's our contact information. The first one is my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have additional questions after this workshop concludes. And if you have other questions, those are provided on the slide. Those contact information are provided on this slide as well. Next slide, please. And with that, I will turn it over to Chin to see if we received any questions from the audience. Thank you for your attention.
And this is Andre. I did respond to a couple of questions in the Q&A box having to do with cumulative effects. And I pointed out that we do consider cumulative effects in our technical documents that we prepare, the product chemical profiles, when we're getting ready to adopt a priority product. And that would similarly, Jennifer Ortega makes the point that since the formulations contain more than one candidate chemical, there is exposure to multiple chemicals from a given product. And we do consider that as part of our rationale to show that we made the determination that there's potential adverse impact.
Thank you for acknowledging that, Andre. I also want to mention that if you have a question from the first presentation that you didn't get a chance to ask, feel free to ask that now as well. Okay, it doesn't look like there are any questions for this portion of the presentation. Let's take a 5-minute break. Welcome back. Our next presenter will discuss the preliminary results of DTSC's nail products lab study. I would like to introduce Ephraim Neuwirth, staff toxicologist, to give today's presentation. Ephraim?
Good morning, everybody. I'm going to be presenting the results of our nail products lab study. These are preliminary results. I'm giving this presentation on behalf of Christine Papagni, who prepared the slides but is unable to provide it today. And as previously shown by Dtsc and by Alicia, we are looking at 3 pieces of sources of information to help inform what products to prioritize. And I am going to be talking about the analytical laboratory study. The overview of my presentation today are to provide you the goals and the research questions of our lab study, discuss the products evaluated, the analytical methods that we used, and some of the preliminary results that we've had. The first major goal is to identify the chemicals which are nail products, both retail and professional. This is also as a follow-up to our 2012 nail product study, where we focused mostly on professional products and we didn't investigate retail products. We would like to use this information to potentially identify additional priority products. Next slide, please. So the next few slides are going to be describing the research questions discussed today. So the main research question is, what is the frequency of detection and the concentrations of chemicals which we are considering for prioritization or for additional research? So as already discussed, we are planning on prioritizing toluene, methyl methacrylate, and triphenylphosphate. We are also researching N-methylpyrrolidone and N,N-dimethylparatoluidine. However, we're also interested still in formaldehyde. It is going to be banned in California as of 2025, but we would still like to know what products contain formaldehyde and at what concentrations. We would like to know the frequency of detection and concentrations of the other candidate chemicals, which may be in nail products. Next slide, please. Other research questions include, do the ingredient labels accurately list the ingredients? This is something that we observed in our 2012 study, that they did not. We would like to know what candidate chemicals can we identify qualitatively as tentatively identified compounds, or TICs. That's our acronym, using the National Institutes of Standards Mass Spectrum Library. We would like to know if 2 toxic phthalates, diabetothalide and diethyl hexophthalate, are detected in nail products. Next slide, please. There are some research questions, which I won't be going into in detail much more because we haven't fully evaluated the data yet. But these include, do the frequency of detection and the concentrations of chemicals differ between nail products that are differently priced or ones that are sold for retail use versus professional use? We would also like to know what candidate chemicals are detected in products which are either marketed to children, for instance, containing cartoon characters on the packaging, or marketed safe to children using specific claims as safe for children or pregnant women. Next slide, please. Other research questions yet to be evaluated include, are there specific products that we evaluated in 2012, which we tried to retest currently? Do they still contain diabetothalide and toluene, which we detected at that time? We would also like to know if retail stores have met their public commitments not to sell certain products or nail products with certain chemicals. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to discuss how the products that we analyzed were chosen. Firstly, we tried to collect a wide variety of nail products. We tried to collect products which would help us address those research questions I discussed. Some of the products were chosen at the suggestion from stakeholders. We also reviewed ingredient labels trying to identify candidate chemicals of concern, and if so, we found them, we may have purchased those products. Next slide, please. We picked products because they were part of a classes of products which we looked at in our screening research. We tried to retest certain brands from our Dtsc's 2012 study. We picked products sometimes just because of convenience or availability. Next slide, please. Again, additional criteria we used to choose our nail products. Again, we wanted a wide variety of products that included both professional and retail, or some which are sold as for both professional and retail use. We picked a variety of price ranges. We picked products because they contain marketing claims as being non-toxic or free of a number of different candidate chemicals. These are what we're calling N-free, because it could have been 3, 4, 5, and on up, free of any number of different chemicals. And again, we picked products because they are marketed to children or were specifically marketed with claims of safety for children and pregnant women. Next slide, please. So these are the different product types which we selected and analyzed. There are 20 different product types. You could see that there are a wide variety of product types. Most other academic studies previously looking at the concentrations of chemicals in nail products have focused on nail polishes and lacquers. We try to gain a variety of other products such as nail primers and thinners, nail glues, etc. We tried to pick at least 5 in each category, which we mostly succeeded in doing. And we tried to pick a larger number of nail polishes and lacquers because that would help us address some of our research questions. All right, next slide, please. I'm going to talk about the analysis which was performed. We had 157 different nail products and 52 different target analytes. We analyzed these 157 products using 3 different methods using gas chromatography mass spectrometry. One of the methods was for volatile organic compounds, another for semi-volatile organic compounds, and a third method for formaldehyde. The VOC and SVOC methods were adopted from standard US EPA methods used to investigate and analyze environmental samples that are commonly performed at our environmental chemistry laboratory. The third method required development of a new method using derivatizing formaldehyde was another chemical before it could be analyzed. Next slide, please. These are our target analytes for the VOCs. I'm including formaldehyde on this slide, but again, it was a separate analysis from the others. There are 32 different VOC target analytes, including the formaldehyde. The compounds highlighted in orange are compounds that have been prioritized or having further research. These chemicals are focused on known nail product chemicals or possible residuals or contaminants and candidate chemicals. Most of these chemicals are solvents, but not all of them. Next slide, please. These are the SVOC analytes. There are 20 of them. And again, if I didn't state it earlier, SVOC stands for semi-volatile organic compounds. And that's a bit different than the volatile organic compounds. And again, highlighted in orange are compounds that have been prioritized or considered for prioritization or additional research. Many of these are possible plasticizer chemicals. Others are preservatives. Some of these chemicals were recommended by stakeholders. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to give you the overview of some of our preliminary results. 148 products, or 94%, had a detected candidate chemical. There were also 148 products with a detected volatile organic compound. 19 different VOC analytes were detected. 37 samples had a detectable level of formaldehyde. Next slide, please. There are 24 different products which contained a detectable level of a semi-volatile organic compound. And there were 8 different Svsc Analytes which were detected. For the tentatively identified compounds, again, which were identified using the NIST library, there were 12 VOCs and 10 SVOCs, which are candidate chemicals. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to start talking about the results for the individual chemicals that we are intending to prioritize or are intending to perform additional research. Toluene was detected in 27 samples at concentrations ranging from 31,000 to 187,000 micrograms per mil. I'm providing in parentheses what that would be in percent. That's a little bit easier to comprehend than micrograms per mil in a very large number like 187,000, but it's only an approximate conversion because these aren't aqueous samples. The highest concentrations of toluene, greater than 10%, were in airbrush top coats, nail hardeners, thinners, and top coats. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to start discussing some of the additional information on the preliminary results for toluene. Before I do that, I would like to discuss the slides. I'm going to show similar slides for the other chemicals. On the larger graph, all the data is presented. However, you can see that some concentrations are very high as 180 K or 180,000 micrograms per mil on the scale on the y-axis. Other concentrations are comparatively much lower. A second graph is shown in the insert was the lower concentrations, in this case going up to a concentration of 400 micrograms per mil. You can see from the samples that are shown in the purple dark blue color that toluene was on the ingredient label in most of the samples that have the high concentrations, though in one case it wasn't. Amongst the ones that are lower concentrations, shown in orange, are the ones that were not on the ingredient label. And also highlighted on this slide, 2 of the products had marketing claims as being non-toxic or toluene-free and non-toxic. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to discuss the preliminary results for methyl methacrylate or MMA. MMA was detected in 38 samples, concentrations up to 0.876%. The highest concentrations, greater than 0.1%, were in a variety of products, including acrylic liquid monomer, airbrush top coat, anti-bite nail polish, brush cleaners, multifunctional base coats, top coats, and UV gel polish. Next slide, please. As you can see, the scale on the left now goes only up to 9,000 to 9K, rather than 180,000 as it was for the toluene. Concentrations are much lower. As you can see, none of the chemicals actually showed MMA on the ingredient labels. However, some of them did list a polymer, for instance, that might include MMA as a residual or contaminant. What I'm showing in purple are the ones that contain polymethyl methacrylate or PMMA on the ingredient label. But there are other ingredients which may have methyl methacrylate as a contaminant or a residual, and we're going to investigate that further as before we write this up in a report. So as also you could see, several of the products contained claims of being free of methyl methacrylate or being toxin-free and were marketed to children. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to discuss the results for triphenylphosphate, which was detected in 17 samples at concentrations up to 4.6%. The highest concentrations were greater than 1%, and they were in a wide variety of products. These include, again, an anti-nail bite product, nail hardeners, multifunctional products, polishes and lacquers, top coats, and gel polishes. Next slide, please. As you can see for TPHP, most but not all accurately showed that TPHP was on the ingredient label, but again, not all, including the one that had the highest concentration at about 4.5% or 45,000 micrograms per mil. That particular product also had marketing claims of being extremely safe, 100% toxin-free, and was marketed as safe for children. Next slide, please. These are going to be the preliminary results for NN-dimethyl paratoluidine, or DMPT. DMPT was detected in 8 samples at concentrations up to 1.13%. The highest concentrations were in acrylic liquid monomers. Actually, I believe 7 out of the 8 samples were detects in acrylic liquid monomers. There were no marketing claims on the products related to DMPT that had the detects. Next slide, please. You can see that there were 6 samples that had much higher concentrations than the last 2. And 4 out of the 6 showed them on the ingredient label, the other 2 didn't. Similarly, one of the ones that had low concentrations had it on the ingredient label, while the other one didn't. I'm now going to discuss N-methylpyrrolidone, or NMP. NMP was only detected in 2 samples. The highest concentration was at 3.9%. It was in a nail polish. Neither of these products included NMP on the ingredient list, and both products were marketed to children, or as being marketed as safe for children or pregnant women. Next slide, please. I'll now discuss the results for formaldehyde, which was detected in 37 samples at concentrations up to 1.56%. The highest concentrations, as expected, were in nail hardeners, where formaldehyde is still known to be used. Next slide, please. As you can see, looking at it, many of the products had very high concentrations, up to 16,000 micrograms per mil, while others were much lower concentrations. The ones which had high concentrations did accurately indicate that formaldehyde was in the product, including in the ingredient label, and one of the products which also highlighted it. And that's the one that had the highest concentration. The ones that were low in concentration, only one of them showed that formaldehyde was in the ingredient label. 4 different products had claims of being formaldehyde-free or non-toxic in the low concentration range. Next slide, please. In regards to diabetothalide and diethyl hexophthalate, 1 sample had diabetothalate at a concentration of 5.11% approximately. It was a nail hardener. Diabetothalate was not on the ingredient list. Diethyl hexophthalate was not detected in any of the products. Next slide, please. I'm now going to show slides of other candidate chemicals which were detected or which were identified as ticks. On this slide are the candidate chemicals which were target analytes which are detected and the frequency at which they were detected. We are currently evaluating whether or not to prioritize other chemicals in nail products, and this information will assist us in that process. I'm going to leave this slide up for another few seconds so you can look at the list of chemicals, and I'll move on to the next slide. Next slide, please. These are the tentatively identified compounds, which were candidate chemicals that were identified in the volatile organic compounds analysis. And I'm going to again leave this slide up for a few seconds for you to look at the chemicals. Next slide, please. These are the tentatively identified candidate chemicals that were identified in the semi-volatile organic compounds analysis, again, with the frequency at which they were reported. And I'll leave this slide up. Next slide, please. So this is my summary and some takeaways. This is one of the largest tests that have been done investigating a very wide range of nail products. Again, as I indicated, most other studies in the past have focused on just nail polishes and in smaller numbers of products. Candidate chemicals were detected in most products. That's 148 of 157 products. We found that ingredient labels are sometimes inaccurate. We're still investigating, under what circumstances are they inaccurate. It seems that for at least the 6 different chemicals that I showed, for the higher concentrations, they were more likely to be accurate, but not always. We also saw that products marketed to children or safe for children sometimes contain specific candidate chemicals. This study will inform DTSC's efforts as well as contribute to the publicly available information on chemicals and nail products. Next slide, please. The next steps are to further evaluate the lab study data, compare findings with DTSC's information call-in, publish these findings in a technical report later this year, and then publish our findings in a journal article. Next slide, please. I'd like to acknowledge the large number of people who have contributed or continue to contribute to this project, including our team lead on the Safer Consumer Products side, Christine Papagni, as well as a variety of people who worked at our environmental chemistry laboratory and did all the analysis. Next slide, please. Here's contact information for questions. These will be shown again later in the overall presentation. The slides are also going to be made available on our website. I'm not exactly sure at a later date. I'm now going to hand this presentation back to Alicia Taylor, who is going to provide a summary and next steps on the SCP program's work on nail products. Thank you.
Hi again. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. We've covered a lot of information today in the 3 presentations. So I'd like to end the workshop with a big picture summary of the preliminary findings from the 3 projects that we've discussed today. These 3 projects have created an extensive data set on chemicals in nail products. 2 priority products have been previously proposed. That's nail products containing toluene and nail products containing MMA. There is currently an open comment period for nail products containing toluene on the CalSafer website. Based on the preliminary findings of our research efforts that we've summarized today, we also plan to propose nail products containing triphenylphosphate as a priority product, and we are currently developing a draft document. This draft document will tentatively be released to the public in early 2023. More information on nail products containing triphenylphosphate will be announced in the upcoming months on our website. And again, you can find more information on triphenylphosphate on the SCP timeline, which is also on our website. In addition, we're proposing additional research on 3 chemicals, that's DMPT, NMP, and acrylic acid. Again, you can find more information on all of the chemicals currently listed on the slide in the background document that's on our website. Next slide, please. Here's the slide that you've seen today during each presentation. Research efforts within each of these projects were used to inform work that was conducted across all projects. Next slide, please. Go ahead and hit next. Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to summarize some of the main findings from each of these projects. So for the screening research, 38 chemicals were researched. 1 out of the 38 has also been proposed. That's nail products containing triphenylphosphate. And again, it's being proposed as a priority product. And currently it's in draft form. Acrylic acid, DMPT, and NMP were selected for further research. For the information call-in, 98% of the products reported contained candidate chemicals. Acrylic acid, DMPT, and triphenylphosphate were reported as functional ingredients in the information call-in. During the lab study, 94% of products tested contained a candidate chemical. Several products were labeled as safe for children, but they contained candidate chemicals. And then some products contained candidate chemicals that were not found on the ingredient list. Next slide, please. There are some overall findings that span multiple projects. For example, the information call-in and the lab study identified MMA in nail coatings. In both of these studies, toluene was found as a functional ingredient, but more often toluene was identified as a residual or contaminant. Next slide, please. And in all 3 studies, Dtsc identified additional candidate chemicals in various nail products. Next slide, please. I'd like to go ahead and talk about the next steps for each of the 3 projects. Again, there is a public comment period on the background document. This can be accessed on our website. The public comment period is open through Tuesday, August 16th. Other next steps include complete the rulemaking on toluene in nail products. We also plan to initiate rulemaking for MMA in nail products soon. And finally, we will be completing the research profile on triphenylphosphate in nail products. Again, this will be shared with the public in early 2023. Next slide, please. We also need to make decisions about prioritization for the 3 other chemicals that were identified in nail products. Again, that's DMPT, NMP, and acrylic acid. Next slide, please. For the information call-in and the lab study, those reports need to be completed. For the lab study specifically, that will include a report and a journal article. Again, when those are ready, they will be shared with the public. For both of those studies, we are still currently evaluating data, and we may also end up identifying additional proposed priority products as we continue to evaluate that data. Next slide, please. Again, here is a list of all of the contact information. The technical leads for each project are shared. There's an email for general questions and meeting requests. You can join our e-list at the link provided. And finally, again, don't forget to submit comments. This contact slide will be shared in a few days once these presentations are uploaded to our website. At this time, I'd like to turn the presentation back to Chin. Thank you.
Thank you, Alicia. So we'll take this time for a Q&A session. If you have questions from the first 2 presentations, feel free to ask them now as all 3 presenters are available. If you would like to ask a question, click the raise hand button and we will call on you. Use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in your question. Ask only one question at a time. We will not be using the chat function. If you are calling in, press *9 to raise your hand and press *6 to unmute yourself. I see we have a couple questions in the Q&A section. Paula says, great work. How easy was it to obtain ingredient labels for the nail products? Also, product containers can be very small and labels do not always provide an ingredient list when purchasing.
Hi, that's correct. Not all of the products that we analyzed did we obtain an ingredient label for, and unfortunately, I don't know how many of those are. We transcribed the ingredients off the labels, or we went to the websites where they were being sold and purchased if we purchased them online, and we tried, or we tried to find them from manufacturers' websites, but again, for some products at least, that wasn't available.
Thank you, Ephraim. Our next question comes from Alexandra. Did you find any changes in toluene levels in the products you tested both in 2012 and again in the recent testing? Second question, did any of those products eliminate or reduce levels of toluene?
Hi, Alexandra. We haven't finished our analysis of that, so I can't really answer it. There were only a few products where we were actually able to try and repurchase either the same product or something similar, just because products change so much over the years. Some of them just don't exist. Most of them don't exist anymore, but that will be in the report when we do write it up and publish it later this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Ephraim. So let me just check to see if there's any. Yeah, I see a raised hand. Harvey, your hand is raised. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, please.
Okay, am I unmuted now?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
I just want to comment on the last thing. There has to have been a huge decrease in the amount of toluene because it was a very common ingredient in nail polish. And then Proposition 65 listed it. There were some cases. So I don't know between what the year was, but around 2012 or whenever that was done, over time, I would venture to say not many nail polishes sold in California have toluene just because of Proposition 65, you know, as a direct ad.
And you may very well be correct. It's not something we've fully looked at yet. In 2012, we only analyzed a relatively small number of products, and these were ones sold for nail salons. So it wasn't a wide picture of the market containing toluene in 2012. So we may not be able to fully address, the observations that you just made. We'll only be able to look at a small number of products.
Thank you, Ephraim.
You're welcome.
Harvey, I see your hand raised again. Do you have a follow-up question?
No. Well, yeah, one other thing is there was a comment before about cleaning up the toluene. Really, it has, first of all, toluene tends to be pretty ubiquitous, as I believe has been discussed with the Dtsc. And the second part of that is cleanup really has to come from refineries and manufacturers of products. So they need to be engaged and the general industry needs to be engaged because it takes more than just a manufacturing company to do that. So that's my insight to it anyway.
Thank you, Harvey. I'll give it a minute or so to see if any more questions come in. If you're on the phone, go ahead and press *9 to raise your hand if you have a question. Christine, do you have a question?
Thanks, Chin. I don't actually have a question. I just wanted to provide a little follow-up explanation. Great job, everybody who gave presentations today on the research, and thank you, Ephraim, for stepping in for me. I wanted to make sure it's clear for people that there are 2 different comment periods open right now on nail products. One is the comment period for the research, which has been presented today, and that comment period is through August 16th. And there's a second comment period for the rulemaking for toluene and nail products, and that comment period ends on August 8th. Any of the comments made today or to the research itself are not considered comments for the toluene and nail products rulemaking comment period. So when you provide comments, please make sure you're going to CalSafer and providing comments either on the research and or for the toluene rulemaking.
Thank you, Christine, for the clarification. I'll give it a few more seconds to see if there's any last-minute questions from the audience. Okay, doesn't look like there's any more questions. We will now end the Q&A session. I would like to introduce Carl Palmer, Deputy Director of the Safer Consumer Products Program, to give our closing remarks. Carl?
Thank you, Chen. Well, first, let me acknowledge and express my gratitude to all of our staff who've worked on this extensive effort. As you can see in each of these 3 areas, these have been major projects. So I want to thank Alicia, Dtsc, and Ephraim for their presentations today, and all the teams that have supported those efforts. I particularly want to call out Christine Papagni, who's been our nails team lead for several years and has really herded all of these efforts and done a great job. And I also want to thank Navashini Virasini, who coordinated this workshop today and got all these materials together and worked with the staff for the presentations. Also, it's important to note that we're a small group in the Safer Consumer Products Program, but we work collaboratively within Dtsc and our partners, in particular in the Human and Environmental Risk Office. Our toxicologists are critical to all of our work, as are our partners in our environmental chemistry lab. And so we're very grateful for all of them. And as you saw today, Ephraim represented both those groups quite well. So I just want to touch on a couple of key things. As you just heard Christine say, key dates for you to remember are August 8th for the comment periods on our rulemaking for toluene and nail products. Consult CalSafer, give us those comments. Anything said today that doesn't count, you got to put it in a formal comment. And then the 16th of August for comments on the background document and what you've heard today. So I want to thank all of you who attended today for your participation today. And I'm thanking you in advance for your input. You heard a lot of questions from us today. We need your help to help us make good decisions. And I think whether you're a manufacturer who has information on chemical content, concentration, specifications, things like that, or you're an academic or advocacy group that has information or other relevant questions, we want to hear from you. So please engage. And lastly, I just want to highlight that, we've provided a lot of information, a lot of work, and there's still more information yet to come. But I do want to highlight there's sometimes we focus on all the negative stuff, but there's some good news in today's presentation. The screening of the chemicals that we did at least for now, have highlighted that there are over 30 chemicals that we're not choosing to pursue. And that was no small task. We spent a lot of work looking at the available information to say, should we be concerned about these chemicals right now? And the answer is no. That doesn't mean that down the line, we might get more information that we have to reassess some of those chemicals based on new information, because there's a lot of data gaps out there. But that's good news. The challenge is moving forward, and the challenge I'd like to make for everyone is to think in terms of how everyone can work to make safer products, to get products that work, that people enjoy. And particularly in these times with the pandemic, if you think of your local nail salon providers, they've been hit hard by the pandemic. And many of them don't have the resources to do other measures which might be protecting their workers and their clients, which is to increase and get better ventilation and things like that. So those workers are our most vulnerable among us. And so I hope we all can work towards taking additional steps, as we've heard today, to make these products safer and yet work, and so people can enjoy them. So with that challenge to all of you to continue engagement and help us answer these questions, I'll thank you all for your participation, and we'll look forward to hearing from you in your formal comments and on down the line as we continue this work. So thank you very much, and that concludes our webinar, our workshop today. Thank you very much.